Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because somewhere, at this very moment, your soulmate is carrying a realization so powerful that they can barely focus on anything else. What happened was not something they planned for. It wasn't something they expected. It wasn't something they could prepare for. Yet suddenly, everything feels different. And listen to this. The day started normally. The world looked normal. Life felt normal. Nothing seemed unusual. But then something happened. Something that stopped them in their tracks. Something that made them pause. Something that forced them to look at their life from a completely different perspective. If you enjoy spiritual and uplifting content, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. And your heart needs this right now because certain moments arrive without warning. Moments that divide life into before and after. Moments that make people question everything they thought they understood. Moments that reveal what truly matters. This was one of those moments. At first, they tried ignoring it. Then they tried understanding it. Then they tried explaining it away. But no matter what they did, the same realization kept returning. Again. And again. And again. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more one person kept appearing in their thoughts. One face. One connection. One name. You. Not because they were forcing themselves to think about you. Not because they were trying to. Because their heart naturally led them there. And your heart needs this right now because when something important happens, people instinctively think about what matters most to them. They think about the people who changed them. They think about the people who left a lasting impression. They think about the people whose presence continues to mean something long after ordinary moments have passed. That is exactly what happened. The realization kept growing. The emotions kept growing. The urgency kept growing. And listen to this. At first, they thought they could keep it to themselves. They thought they could process everything alone. They thought they could sort through the emotions quietly. But the truth felt too big. Too important. Too overwhelming. The more they thought about it, the more they felt the need to talk. Immediately. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Because your heart needs this right now because some truths become heavier the longer they remain unspoken. Some emotions become louder the longer they remain hidden. Some realizations refuse to stay silent. This realization was one of them. And listen to this. As the hours passed, they found themselves replaying old memories. Conversations. Moments. Experiences they once considered ordinary. Yet suddenly those memories seemed different. Brighter. More meaningful. More important. Every memory seemed connected to a larger truth they were only now beginning to understand. And your heart needs this right now because hindsight often reveals things that were invisible in the moment. Sometimes we only understand the significance of a connection after time has passed. Sometimes we only recognize someone's importance after life gives us perspective. Sometimes we only understand what matters when something unexpected shakes our world. That was exactly what was happening. Perspective was arriving. Clarity was arriving. Truth was arriving. And listen to this. The more clarity they gained, the more difficult it became to ignore their feelings. Questions they once avoided demanded answers. Thoughts they once dismissed demanded attention. Emotions they once suppressed demanded acknowledgement. Everything was moving toward the same conclusion. Everything was pointing toward the same truth. Everything was leading toward the same conversation. The conversation they desperately want to have with you. And your heart needs this right now because they are no longer running from what they feel. They are no longer distracting themselves. They are no longer pretending certain emotions don't exist. Something inside them has changed. Something important. Something permanent. And listen to this. For the first time in a very long time, they are allowing themselves to be completely honest. Honest about their thoughts. Honest about their feelings. Honest about what truly matters. That honesty feels both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because truth creates freedom. Terrifying because truth creates vulnerability. Yet despite the fear, they know one thing with complete certainty. They need to talk to you. Not because they want attention. Not because they want sympathy. Not because they want reassurance. Because they have reached a realization that feels impossible to keep to themselves. And your heart needs this right now because life occasionally gives people wake-up calls. Moments that remind them what matters. Moments that reveal what deserves their energy. Moments that show them which connections truly belong in their heart. Your soulmate just experienced one of those moments. And the result changed everything. The priorities changed. The perspective changed. The future changed. Because sometimes the biggest event isn't something that happens around a person. Sometimes the biggest event is something that happens inside them. A realization. A truth. A moment of clarity. A moment powerful enough to make them reach for the one person they suddenly cannot stop thinking about. And this is only the beginning. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after the shock of what happened began to settle, your soulmate found themselves facing a truth they could no longer run from. At first, they thought they simply needed time. Time to think. Time to process. Time to understand why their emotions suddenly felt so intense. But listen to this. The more time they spent alone with their thoughts, the clearer everything became. The clearer everything became. The harder it became to stay silent. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes life creates a moment so powerful that it strips away every distraction. Every excuse. Every delay. Suddenly, the things we thought were important seem small, and the things we ignored suddenly become impossible to overlook. That is exactly what happened. Something shifted inside them. Something awakened inside them. Something they had been avoiding for a very long time. And listen to this, they started replaying memories they hadn't thought about in months. Conversations that once seemed ordinary suddenly felt meaningful. Small moments they once overlooked suddenly carried enormous emotional weight. A simple conversation. A shared laugh. A memory they thought they forgot. All of it came rushing back. And your heart needs this right now because those memories weren't returning by accident. They were returning because they were connected to something deeper. Something their heart had been trying to understand for a long time. The realization was growing. Quietly. Steadily. Powerfully. And listen to this. At first they resisted it. They questioned it. They challenged it. They tried convincing themselves they were being emotional. But every attempt to dismiss the feeling only made it stronger. Every answer led back to the same place. Every reflection led back to the same person. Every realization led back to you. And your heart needs this right now because there comes a point when denying the truth becomes more exhausting than accepting it. There comes a point when pretending becomes heavier than honesty. Your soulmate had reached that point. The walls were cracking. The defenses were weakening. The truth was rising. And listen to this, what surprised them most was not the realization itself. It was how long the realization had been waiting. How many signs they ignored. How many feelings they postponed. How many truths they quietly pushed aside because they weren't ready to face them. Now they were ready. Or at least ready enough. Because your heart needs this right now, growth doesn't always happen gradually. Sometimes growth arrives all at once. Sometimes one experience creates years of understanding in a single day. That day had arrived. And suddenly they saw everything differently. Their priorities looked different. Their future looked different. Their heart looked different. And listen to this. For the first time in a very long time, they stopped asking themselves what was practical. They stopped asking themselves what was safe. They stopped asking themselves what was expected. Instead, they asked one simple question. What is true? The answer came immediately. The answer came clearly. The answer came honestly. And your heart needs this right now because truth often arrives with a sense of peace. Not because it removes uncertainty, but because it removes confusion. The confusion was disappearing. The hesitation was disappearing. The doubt was disappearing. And in its place came certainty. A quiet certainty. A powerful certainty. A certainty they could not ignore. And listen to this. The more they accepted that truth, the more urgent everything felt. Not because something terrible happened. Not because they were afraid. Because they suddenly understood the value of honesty. They suddenly understood the cost of waiting too long. They suddenly understood that some things deserve to be spoken before life creates another reason to postpone them. That realization changed everything. If this message is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. And your heart needs this right now because they no longer want to keep carrying these thoughts alone. They no longer want to keep pretending certain feelings don't exist. They no longer want to wake up tomorrow with the same words still trapped inside their heart. Something important happened. Something that changed their perspective. Something that reminded them how quickly life can shift. And now, more than ever, they feel the need to tell the truth. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. And listen to this. As they sit with everything they have learned, one realization continues growing stronger than all the others. Some people enter our lives and leave memories. Some people enter our lives and leave lessons. And some people enter our lives and leave a permanent mark on the heart. That realization is what they can no longer hide. That realization is why they need to talk. That realization is why today feels different from every day before it. Because the truth they have been avoiding is finally asking to be heard. And this time, they are finally ready to listen. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after hours of reflection, unanswered questions, and emotions they could no longer push aside, your soulmate finally experienced a moment they will never forget. A moment that changed everything. A moment that shifted their perspective. A moment that forced them to confront the truth. And listen to this. It didn't happen dramatically. It didn't happen during a huge event. It didn't happen because someone told them something shocking. It happened quietly. Unexpectedly. Naturally. Yet somehow it felt more powerful than anything they had experienced in a very long time. And your heart needs this right now because some of the biggest transformations happen silently. They happen inside the heart. They happen inside the mind. They happen during moments when nobody else realizes something life-changing is taking place. That is exactly what happened. Your soulmate was going through their day. Thinking. Reflecting. Trying to understand everything they had been feeling. And then suddenly, everything became clear. The confusion disappeared. The mixed signals disappeared. The uncertainty disappeared. For the first time in a long time, they stopped questioning what their heart was trying to tell them. And listen to this. The realization arrived all at once. Like a missing puzzle piece finally falling into place. Like a question finally receiving its answer. Like a door finally opening after remaining closed for far too long. And your heart needs this right now because clarity carries a special feeling. A peaceful feeling. A powerful feeling. A feeling that removes doubt. That feeling was washing over them. Minute by minute. Thought by thought. Memory by memory. And listen to this. As the realization deepened, they started looking back at everything differently. Old conversations suddenly made sense. Old emotions suddenly made sense. Old memories suddenly made sense. Things they once dismissed now felt important. Things they once ignored now felt meaningful. Things they once questioned now felt obvious. And your heart needs this right now because hindsight has a strange power. It allows people to see what was always there but somehow remained hidden. That is exactly what was happening. Your soulmate wasn't discovering something new. They were finally understanding something that had existed all along. The signs had always been there. The feelings had always been there. The connection had always been there. They were simply seeing it clearly for the first time. And listen to this. The deeper they reflected, the more emotional everything became. Not because they were sad. Not because they were afraid. Because they finally understood. Understanding creates emotion. Understanding creates perspective. Understanding creates change. And change was happening. Real change. Permanent change. And your heart needs this right now because growth often begins with a single realization. One realization can change priorities. One realization can change decisions. One realization can change the future. Your soulmate had reached that point. The point where truth becomes impossible to ignore. The point where honesty becomes necessary. The point where silence no longer feels comfortable. And listen to this. For a long time they believed there would always be more time. More time to think. More time to wait. More time to figure everything out. But something about today's experience changed that belief. Suddenly time felt valuable. Suddenly moments felt important. Suddenly honesty felt urgent. And your heart needs this right now because life has a way of reminding people that opportunities are precious. Not because opportunities disappear immediately. Because nobody knows how many chances they will receive. That thought stayed with them. That realization stayed with them. That feeling stayed with them. And listen to this. The more they sat with those thoughts, the more one question continued appearing. A simple question. A powerful question. A question they could not stop asking themselves. What am I waiting for? The answer surprised them. Nothing. There was nothing left to wait for. The truth was already there. The feelings were already there. The realization was already there. All that remained was honesty. And your heart needs this right now because honesty often arrives after a long journey. A journey through fear. A journey through doubt. A journey through uncertainty. Your soulmate had traveled that journey. Now they were reaching the destination. And listen to this. As the day continued, they felt different. Lighter. Clearer. More focused. Not because every question had been answered. Because the most important question had been answered. The question hidden beneath everything else. The question their heart had been asking for a long time. And finally, the answer arrived. The answer brought peace. The answer brought certainty. The answer brought courage. And your heart needs this right now because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite fear. Courage is telling the truth despite uncertainty. Courage is choosing honesty despite vulnerability. That courage was beginning to grow inside them. Slowly. Steadily. Powerfully. And listen to this. By now they understood why the urge to speak with you felt so strong. It wasn't because they wanted attention. It wasn't because they needed validation. It wasn't because they were lonely. It was because something important had changed inside them. Something that could no longer remain hidden. Something that deserved acknowledgement. Something that deserved honesty. And your heart needs this right now because the biggest thing that happened today wasn't an event. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a coincidence. The biggest thing that happened today was a realization. A realization powerful enough to reshape their perspective. A realization powerful enough to change their future. A realization powerful enough to make them feel like they need to talk to you immediately. Because once truth becomes clear, everything else begins changing around it. And this realization was only the beginning. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after everything they experienced, after all the reflection, all the realizations, and all the emotions they could no longer ignore, your soulmate finally understands exactly why they feel such urgency. And listen to this. The urgency is not coming from fear. The urgency is not coming from panic. The urgency is not coming from confusion. The urgency is coming from clarity. For the first time in a very long time, they know exactly what their heart has been trying to tell them. Join our spiritual community by subscribing and keeping notifications on, so you never miss a message meant for your soul. And your heart needs this right now because clarity changes people. It changes how they see the past. It changes how they see the future. It changes what they prioritize. It changes what they are willing to risk. That is exactly what happened. Something inside them shifted. Something inside them awakened. Something inside them finally stopped hiding. And listen to this. After all the thinking was finished, after all the questions had been asked, they found themselves sitting in silence. Not empty silence. Meaningful silence. The kind of silence that arrives after a person finally understands something important. The kind of silence that arrives when the truth no longer needs to fight for attention. The truth had finally won. And your heart needs this right now because for a long time they were looking for certainty in the wrong places. They looked outside themselves. They looked at circumstances. They looked at timing. They looked at practical reasons. Yet every path eventually led them back to the same realization. The same truth. The same feeling. The same person. You. And listen to this. At first, that realization felt overwhelming. Then it felt emotional. Then it felt peaceful. Because once a person stops resisting what they feel, they stop fighting themselves. The struggle disappears. The confusion disappears. The constant questioning disappears. Only understanding remains. And your heart needs this right now because understanding creates freedom. Freedom from doubt. Freedom from hesitation. Freedom from pretending. Your soulmate is beginning to experience that freedom now. For perhaps the first time in years. And listen to this. They started asking themselves a new question. Not, what if things go wrong? Not, what if I get hurt? Not, what if I regret being honest? Instead they asked, what if honesty is exactly what this moment requires? That question changed everything. Because suddenly the focus shifted. Away from fear. Away from uncertainty. Away from imagined problems. And toward truth. And your heart needs this right now because truth often asks for courage. Not dramatic courage. Quiet courage. The courage to speak. The courage to admit. The courage to stop hiding. That courage has been growing inside them ever since the realization arrived. Minute by minute. Thought by thought. Heartbeat by heartbeat. And listen to this. As they reflected on the past, they noticed something surprising. Many of their happiest memories carried the same energy. The same warmth. The same feeling. The same connection. Somehow, you appeared in more of those memories than they realized. Not because every memory involved you directly. Because your influence remained. Your presence remained. Your impact remained. And your heart needs this right now because meaningful people leave traces behind. Not temporary traces. Lasting traces. The kind that appear unexpectedly. The kind that survive time. The kind that remain long after ordinary moments fade away. That realization became impossible for them to ignore. And listen to this. The more they thought about it, the more one truth became undeniable. Life is unpredictable. Life changes quickly. Life rarely waits for people to feel perfectly ready. Important conversations often happen before perfect timing arrives. Important truths often need to be spoken before certainty arrives. Important feelings often deserve acknowledgement before another day passes. And your heart needs this right now because that realization is exactly why they feel such urgency. They do not want another opportunity to pass. They do not want another meaningful truth to remain unspoken. They do not want another day spent pretending certain feelings are less important than they really are. Something changed today. Not around them. Inside them. And listen to this. They realize that some people become part of our story in ways we do not immediately understand. Some people teach lessons. Some people create memories. Some people change perspectives. And some people quietly become part of the heart itself. Without permission. Without warning. Without effort. The connection simply grows. That is what happened. And your heart needs this right now because the biggest thing that happened today was not an event. It was not a coincidence. It was not a secret. It was a realization powerful enough to transform how they see everything. A realization that finally answered questions they had been carrying for a long time. A realization that finally brought peace where confusion once existed. A realization that finally gave them the courage to speak. And listen to this. If they could sit down with you right now, without distractions, without interruptions, without fear, there are a few things they would want you to know. They would tell you that some connections stay with a person longer than expected. They would tell you that some memories become more valuable over time. They would tell you that some people become impossible to forget. Not because anyone tries to remember them. Because the heart remembers naturally. And your heart needs this right now because that is the truth they can no longer ignore. The truth they can no longer postpone. The truth they can no longer hide behind excuses. Today changed something. Today revealed something. Today awakened something. And now they understand why the need to talk feels so urgent. Because honesty has finally become more important than fear. Because clarity has finally become stronger than doubt. Because truth has finally become louder than silence. And listen to this. The conversation they want to have is not really about the event that happened today. The event was only the catalyst. The real story is what the event revealed. What the event clarified. What the event awakened. It revealed feelings. It clarified priorities. It awakened courage. And your heart needs this right now because courage changes lives. A single honest conversation can change a future. A single truthful moment can change a perspective. A single realization can change everything. Your soulmate knows this now. That is why they need to talk. That is why today feels different. That is why the urgency feels real. Because something big really did happen. Not in the outside world. Inside their heart. And once that kind of truth awakens, it becomes impossible to pretend nothing has changed. Before you go, please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. May peace, light, and blessings always be with you.